Welcome. I'd like to welcome you here to our first event of 2022. In honor of the new year, I thought I'd wear white, generally a symbol of new beginning. And since every year, and for that matter, every moment is a new beginning, I thought it would make sense to display that exteriorly. Beginnings are important, and we all too often think about beginnings in the sense of stopping something and beginning something else. But there's an amount of carry through from the past that can be very important. For example, let me use some historical examples. Um, in yoga, for example, looking back to what is probably the first document in yoga, the Yoga Sutras, written a couple of millennia before the current era. The first line, I think the Yoga Sutra 1.1 says, now we can begin the practice of yoga. Now is very important because, of course, now is the only time we can do anything. On the other hand, now, in the sense that it is used there, means now that we have performed all of our life duties, now that we have situated ourselves in a stable place, now that we have performed whatever obligations there are to the community and the world, then now we can begin the practice of yoga. This is common in many mystical traditions. For example, in Judaism, before one can really start the study of the interior process of the mysticism, it's generally concerned by tradition that one needs to be 40 years old and married and have children and be established in the community and have spent one's life reading the Torah. Sufism is very similar in that in order to become a member of a Sufi order, one has to be established in the religion, know the practice, know the history, know the culture, so that one doesn't find oneself in a completely new place. So yes, now is important. Now is a new beginning. Now is the only moment we ever have. But it's not completely cut off from who we are, because who we are brings us here. So I just wanted to begin the new year with a couple of those thoughts about newness and new beginnings. And I'm wearing white for the occasion. So are there some questions?
That's wonderful, Terry, and I'm so glad to be here, especially start of the year. What does it mean to begin anew? And where should one start?
Ah, well, what it means to begin anew is to have a new view of one's life and one's place in it. A new view that is concerned with knowing who we are and knowing what is in the depths of our hearts and in knowing what it is that we love and in many ways what we aspire to. Now, I say aspire cautiously because often there's a mistake in thinking that I need to somehow transform myself before I can begin this newness or this great knowing of myself and the truth. But very much like what I was saying about yoga, uh, when we take up that newness, we need to do so in the context of knowing who we are and having clear values. And if our objective is to know the truth, it's important to state that, and to reaffirm that whenever one asks that question. And the question of beginnings and newness is a question that one can ask every day, every hour, every moment, so that one can be clear on who one is and what it is we're doing here and what it is we want to know, do, be, right now, right now.
Thank you. Another question is, if we are finding ourselves setting the same goals every year, then how can we reframe those goals so they're not the same? Or how can we rephrase those goals?
I like that question very much because it's very practical. As you know, I like to deal with practical questions and questions from people who are looking at a particular issue or condition or problem. And this is one I've heard before. This is one I may have used myself before. And I think often the issue of having the same problems, the same issues, is one of not seeing them clearly. And rather than looking at them as objectives or things that one can do in the future, or what I would like to be, I would like to be 30 pounds thinner. I would like to have a vacation in the South Pacific. I would like to write a book. Instead of looking at those as things that one might do in the future, to reframe those questions in terms of what you might do right now. And in the examples I just gave, instead of thinking about, well, it's my desire to lose weight, say, I'm going to begin this diet today or this lifestyle today. If it's a matter of that vacation in the South Pacific, instead of thinking about it, wishing for it, hoping you can plan for it at some time, begin right now. Think about how you might change your schedule, what priorities you might shuffle, how you might uh, trade time and experience with someone else in order to free yourself for the experience that you want to have. And the last example, I'd like to write a book or an essay or poetry for that matter. It's a matter of deciding to do it now. We've talked a lot about now. Do it now. And doing it now means taking up a pencil or sitting at your typewriter uh, and trying it. And then employing whatever resources you need, a friend, an editor, a coach, in order to get you what you want. But rather than thinking about it as something that, well, it's an objective that I've had, and I've said this before. No, 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 stop that. Reframe it in terms of now. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to take the first step, and then take that step. Nothing's ever quite as important as beginning. Beginning is often hard, but there's nothing quite as much uh, important in terms of bringing in the resources as beginning. When you begin to do something, it's as if heaven and earth conspire to help you. Just taking up the process and making that decision to do or go or be employs resources that are well beyond your ability to understand that will come to help you as part of your decision. It's as if the universe conspires to help you as long as you do your part, and your part is taking that first step.
Great response, Terry.
Thank you, Angela.
Thomas says, love the meditation on new beginnings. Wonderful message with which to start the new year. May this new year bring health, joy, and contentment to us all. Thank you for such peaceful content.
Thomas, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate these kinds of comments from our community. I think I probably don't get enough, and I mean that in the sense that the feedback I get on these videos is really very heartening, and it helps me focus and know what is of value to people, because I could certainly talk about things that are of no interest or no value to anyone, and without that feedback from those who hear these videos and listen in, I might be lost, and I might be saying some very important and wise things that are of just no interest to anyone. So, Thomas, thank you for writing. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Maria has a question. She says, I have a question, Terry. Could you expand more on the concept of wokeness/awakening? I feel there's too many people who feel are woke, but really don't even grasp the concept?
Well, woke is one of those contemporary words that is just laden with meaning and beliefs. And I think I'd like to avoid the current word woke because it involves all sorts of social contexts. And I'd kind of like to stay away from those. What is important about awakening in the classical or traditional sense is that it allows oneself to have more of a view, more knowledge, more participation in that which is, in the truth. And that's what's important to me. And that's the kind of awakening that I set out to find when I took up my particular path. And the current social context that has given us the term woke is something I find not very helpful in terms of planning the day, in terms of my engagement with and knowledge with life, the spiritual path, the truth.
Great. Johnson writes, I saw your last video about the new beginning and I felt really identified. It made me think a lot about my actual relationship with my boyfriend. Since a few months ago, I've been considering to end things with him because I feel it's a toxic relationship. Do you know what's the best way to end things with someone without hurting him and also not taking back the decision?
Well, it's easy to say things like, well, honesty is the best policy. Uh, and in fact, honesty is the best policy. But what you have to do is face the issue and face that issue in such way that you don't laden it with emotional constraints. You want to see it objectively. You want to acknowledge the relationship you have. And finally, what you want to agree on is that it's just not the right relationship for both of you. Um, it may meet some of your needs, but not enough of your needs. So the best way to do that is to understand that it's not because you're bad people, not because you need to change who you are, and it's not because uh, things have gone terribly wrong. It's because it's actually not the right relationship. And the more you can focus on the fact that it's not the right relationship, the freer of it you can be, and the less toxicity it will have, and a more honorable end for both of you. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Jafar Baron has a question. How long have you been inspiring others? You make it sound like you've been in this for decades.
Well, that's a question that I just can't answer because I'd have to ask those who've been inspired. Uh, I really don't know how to deal with that. I've been a truth seeker for a long time. And one of the greatest joys in my life is in being able to communicate the things that I find or I discover that are true or discover that are important uh, to others. And as I said in response to a previous comment today, that kind of feedback is important to me. But I've been getting that feedback for a long time because of my joy in knowing and in communicating. And that's for me one of the highest pleasures of life.
Wonderful. Gareth says, I love to start my year and make my journal. When I journal, I write my whole heart out. I write out my strongest feelings and thoughts. And although those feelings and thoughts may be sometimes scary and or very sad, it feels so good just facing them, letting them out. Using this as a tool to also forget things opens a whole new world of possibilities. I'm curious, how long have you been journalizing?
I have been journalizing since my high school girlfriend turned me on to the process. And that has been an important part of my life and my path. And I'd just like to focus on that for a moment because One of the things that makes journalizing effective is that you get to objectify what's inside of you. You get to state the problem. This can also be accomplished by talking to a friend or your priest or a senior or a guide, or for that matter, a pet. As long as you get to objectify what's inside of you so that you can see it or hear it clearly, it can be a tremendous help. And that's one of the advantages of journalizing. Journalizing is really more important about what we're doing today than it is about our history, which we can see in the journal if we take the time to go there. It's really more about, as you say, expressing the depths of your emotion, your knowledge, your commitment, your priorities, your values, and knowing what they are. Journalizing is great for that process. I encourage everybody to do journalizing. Um, yeah, let me just stop there.
Lauren is asking a question. I think a concept we don't talk enough is about self forgiveness and how it can help us to rediscover hope. Could you maybe make a video where you tell us what you think about this? Thank you.
Yes, I'd be happy to make a tape about that, and I'll do that in the near future. But since you've asked the question, and since it follows the question on journalizing, let me try to put those two together and say that one of the things you can do in your journal is write down the things that you want to forget, the things that are no longer part of your life, things that you want to leave behind you, and be clear about those too. It's easier to move on if those things aren't clinging to you. And one way to get them to stop clinging is to identify them, call them what they are, and then intentionally put them aside. Yes, that's very important. And thank you for the tip. I will do a video on that this month.
Macy didn't write. Hi Terry, I've been journalizing my life since the last few weeks, and I've noticed that it feels different when I do it by hand than when I do it on my phone. Does this happen to you too?
Yes, I've had that experience. There's something about writing uh, that brings out or reflects more of one's wholeness. There are certainly various systems of character analysis based on writing. And I'm not thoroughly conversant with graphology or graphoanalysis or any of the other techniques, but there's something to them. Uh, and that's enough to say that yes, writing well is a matter of being well and being whole. Um, it's something that is worth working on simply to get it right. And once you're able to write clearly, um, you'll find it's a big help. That isn't to say that you should abandon writing on your computer, but it's an additional bolt in your quiver. It's an additional tool you can use to get to know yourself and to be more whole in terms of who you are. Yes, writing can be important. It can be useful.
Great. Jaffer Barron has another question. He says, thank you for your response. What would you say to people whose only motivation is acquiring wealth and becoming rich?
Uh, I feel very sorry for those people. Uh, yes, and I know they can be very annoying, but not only from a spiritual and philosophical point of view, uh, can I say that that's not a good use of one's time. But the scientific evidence, the long longitudinal studies that have been done in the last 60 or 70 years, where they have followed populations of people through their lives, have drawn very, very clear conclusions. And this is hard science, that the thing that makes people happy and fulfilled in their lives are relationships. not things, however grandiose those things might be. No, nobody ever faces the moment of death and says, "Oh, I wish I had more stuff." But they will say, "I wish I'd spent more time in those relationships that are important to me."
Thank you. Tanya says, I love this community, Terry. Thank you. I also follow your other channel, Here Now One. Terry, I've always wondered what and who inspires you. Hope you can answer my question.
Wow, what and who inspires me? I've been inspired by a lot of people. Uh, where to start? I guess I could start with my high school science teacher, who was responsible for my love of science and my involvement in science most of my life. Uh, I would also look to people I admire for personal accomplishments and achievements. And uh, person that comes to mind is Christina Granville, who you've probably never heard of. She was perhaps the best of all spies in the Second World War, and not only knew her craft well, but took such great personal risk toward the accomplishments of what she thought was a worthy objective. Uh, it's really a story that I find inspiring. I'm also inspired by people who are able to get more out of others as I think of it. And I'm thinking of guess one of the people I think is inspiring is Louis Leakey, the anthropologist, because under his guidance, he turned three fairly undistinguished women into the senior contributors in their field. Uh, top of which was a woman who started, I believe, as his assistant, someone named Jane Goodall, who we all know and are very grateful for her presence and her work. But perhaps I'm talking too much about myself. Let's get on to another question.
So, Gratitude Radiance says, I'm loving the shirt. You're looking sharp.
Oh, uh, thank you so much. This is a new look for me that I'm trying, as I said, because it's a new beginning. It's the beginning of 2022. Uh, but that kind of feedback is helpful too. Thank you.
Danny says, your videos are helping me so much in my life journey. Thank you. I wish you all the best.
Danny, thank you. Uh, Again, I appreciate the feedback. And while I'm on the subject, if you enjoy this community and this kind of discussion, we're going to have another upcoming event. So stay tuned and pay attention to this channel, to Terry Moore Awake and Here Now One. And it won't be that long, and we can meet back here again and maybe even have more fun.
Gratitude says again, your last meditation on new beginnings really hit the spot with me. I'm starting a new project this year and don't know where to begin. I'm scared but excited. Would you recommend an exercise to keep me focused on my new goals? Thank you. Blessings.
Well, thank you, Gratitude. Uh, as I said before, the thing that's important is to begin. So I would take the very first part of that project, isolate it as a definitive objective, and set out to do it. And then ask the question again, but ask the question after you've actually done something, because these things tend to loom over us until we start them. And then when we start them, ah, it's just another objective, just something else we can do. It's not looming anymore.
Thank you. Laura is saying, hi Terry, Happy New Year to you. I don't feel very comfortable with my actual job. I feel that I'm no longer growing with the company and I'm not learning anything new yet. I've been wondering if I should change my job, but I'm afraid of not loving the new one. I'm also worried that maybe I'm not very passionate of my career, civil engineering, and that I should have studied what I love the most, which is veterinary school. Do you think it's too late to start a new career? I'm 27 years old.
Uh, No, not at all. First of all, 27 isn't that old. But more than that, I love the idea of someone who has engineering skills going into veterinary practice. That makes a lot of sense to me. Uh, and in terms of your current job, you've said it all. It's not fulfilling. The thing that makes a job fulfilling is not the amount of money or the status or the prestige that it gives you. The thing that makes a job fulfilling is the actual content of the job. And even, I'm guessing, if they were to pay you twice what you're paying now, you wouldn't like your job any better. You might have more interesting distractions, but you wouldn't like the job anymore. So what you need to do is follow your passion and find what you love in the content of your work. And if for you that's veterinary medicine, please go do that. And please keep in touch. I'd like to hear how the story unfolds. Well, that's all the time we have today, but I've had a good time, and I hope you've had a good time and have found this interesting. Remind you that there will be another upcoming event in the very near future. So please stay tuned to this channel, to Terry Moore Wake and Here Now One, uh, so that you can be with us. I would like that. Thank you all. Thank you, really. Thank you.